Maneva na say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there osia dem yopo.
I'm thinking after the emergency meeting of the cocoa crisis, but isn't it like 1 year too late?
Yeah.
Considering that you are inheriting a crime scene, does it take you 1 year, for people to start knowing the rot? I mean, would anything have prevented maybe investigations in the first year?
Yeah.
Investigations were full force.
Yes.
Yeah. And then whatever the results are handed over to. Let me let you talk small. What was your reaction to that?
Yes, I think if you look at the cocoa sector, it's one of the most sensitive areas. And because cocoa for long has been the backbone of this particular economy until recently when other sectors came in. So cocoa farmers are people who over the years have made significant contribution to the development of this country. That cannot be discounted from Kwame Nkrumah time up to this time. So anything that affects the cocoa farmer is a national issue. And I think that is why the president actually came in, convened an emergency cabinet meeting to have some sort of a resolution addressing this imminent crisis that we are facing.
Just before I left, we have a crisis in our cocoa sector. We set a producer price for the farmer. At the time we set the price of cocoa on the international market was 7,200. We have a policy in Ghana where we give the farmer 70% of the world market price. The other 30% is used for administration, to supply fertilizers to the farmers, to provide scholarships for their children and all that kind of thing. The CD's value was 11.5 CDs to $1. After we set the producer price, the world market price has declined to 4,200. The CD has appreciated in value to 10.7 to the dollar. And so suddenly it means that for every ton you buy at the producer price, you have a gap. And so we'll be losing. And so we held a crisis meeting and we took decisions. And one of the major problems is that to buy cocoa from our own farmers, we rely on funding from outside. And you know what the collateral for the funding is, our own cocoa beans. And so you have to collateralize the beans to the financier, buy the beans and just ship them, and they pay you the international market price. So one of the key decisions we've taken is that we're going to stop foreign funding for the purchase of our cocoa. We are going to raise domestic bonds. We have enough CDs in Ghana to pay for our cocoa. We're going to raise domestic bonds, buy our own cocoa. We don't need to collateralize the beans. I know the interesting part. We have the capacity to process 400,000 tons of those beans, processing capacity in Ghana. But because the beans are collateralized, we cannot even allocate those beans to the local processors. We have to ship all the beans outside. Now, if we buy the beans ourselves, we can take 400,000 tons out of the beans and give to our local processors to add value.
Yes, there is a development going on at the world stage. We all know the fluctuations in terms of pricing and supply of cocoa. Normally, the pricing is dependent on supply and demand across the world, and that has affected pricing across board. And that, in effect, has had some sort of a downturn effect on the cocoa farmer, and this is what has generated this whole controversy. But I'll come to the investigation bit, but let me start from this whole angle. You see, there has been too much propaganda around this particular issue to the extent that the actual facts are missing.
What are the facts that are missing?
So to say that the government is insensitive to cocoa farmers, and he made a promise that he will actually elevate cocoa prices, and now after getting political power, they've decided to slash that particular price, and that is not in fulfillment of the promise made to cocoa farmers. First of all, if you want to look at the genuine intention of the government regarding this whole cocoa brouhaha, you need to go back to August 3rd, 2025, because that is when the government first initiative on cocoa was announced.
And a way to revamp the collapsed cocoa sector. Incentives will be provided to our hard-working farmers to increase cocoa production. We aim to add 200,000 hectares of cocoa to garnish outputs in order to increase income of our farmers. And to cocoa farmers, the Cocobod chief executive has informed me that in August they will announce the new cocoa producer price. And I can assure you the price is going to be a very, very, very good price. So those of you who don't have cocoa farms, go and start looking for land and start planting cocoa.
When John Mahama was in opposition, he made a promise, very categorical to farmers, that looking at the pricing at the war stage at the time and looking at what the government then was paying to farmers, it was a cheat. Because at the time, cocoa prices at the war stage had gone to about $1,000, $10,000 per ton. And at the time, government was paying less than 33% of the FOB price to cocoa farmers, because at the time they were being paid around $3,000, which was way, 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 way below the actual price, because the exchange rate at the time was 15.75. That was what was used by Cocobod to do the pricing.
So first of all, yes, in Chad is the next pricing season. So the next pricing regime, is based on the price. So we look at the price now, a world market pricing at the time the next pricing season will start September 1st. Okay. So 1st of September, it will determine, or it will be dependent on the world market price at the time in September. So let's say 7,000. So all what we are saying is that we are committing to give the farmer 70% of all FOB prices. So FOB price and whatever it is, we'll give them 70%. Today, they are giving them 30-something%.
So at that time, when that particular promise was made, cocoa farmers became energized and they actually maybe some voted for a change. So you expect that you get that particular price. So when John Mahama came, his promise was that I was going to pay them 70% of the FOB price.
When it comes to cocoa production, Western North is a leader. Indeed, the people of this region are the backbone of Ghana's cocoa production. But I'm aware of the hardships our cocoa farmers face: low prices, inadequate extension services, and delays in the distribution of cocoa inputs. And so let me be clear today, we will ensure our commitment to pay our farmers 70% of the world market price of cocoa. The sweat of our cocoa farmers deserves dignity and a fair reward.
When you say FOB price, that is the price that is determined at the world market. That's the price, and the farm gate price is the price paid to the cocoa farmer here. So at the time when they took over, the pricing started reducing. So when John Mahama took over, at the time the announcement was made, cocoa price at the war stage was $7,200 per ton. And then the government paid 70% of that particular amount, which translated to $5,400. So the challenge is that because at the time the dollar had depreciated, or the CD had appreciated, they could no longer use the 15.75 to do the calculation. Because
was the calculation done based on the 15.5?
Yes, it's based on the previous one was done based on the 15.5. That is the exchange rate. But unfortunately or fortunately, because the dollar depreciation has its own benefit, to the cocoa farmer, the price had the value had actually depreciated. So you can no longer use the 15.75 to do the calculation. We were forced to use the 10.5. which will obviously reduce the cocoa price, the expectation. So if we had used the 15.5 to do the valuation, at the time, the cocoa farmer would have been entitled to 5,000, 6,000, which will be in fulfillment of the promise that the president made. So it wasn't that the president made a promise that I'll pay them 70% of the FOB price, and he decided not to pay. The FOB price 70% was paid, but because of that, because of the fluctuations and in the dollar, that resulted in the kind of figure cocoa farmers had. So when that was done, it was around 3,200 because the 70% translated to 501,000, which divided by 16, because every ton is 16 bags. When you divide, you get 3,200 thereabout. Then upon consultation, the government realized that the Ivorian price was higher than Ghana, and in order to stop smuggling of cocoa across border, they needed to also again increase the price. So the 51,000 was increased to 58,000. That brought additional 400 Ghana cedis onto the price. So instead of 3,200, it ended up at 3,600 Ghana cedis per bag. So that is the commitment of the government. Then post that, the crisis started unfolding. Post that, the crisis started. So in order
because of the strength of the currency?
Yes. So if you want to judge the government, you judge him based on the initial commitment. John Mahama said 70% of the FOB price, and actually he paid 70% of the FOB price. And then subsequent to that, the price fluctuations started unfolding. So on daily basis, it started coming down. It started coming down. And then the government was confronted with an issue of either to maintain the earlier price or go ahead and maybe take a decision and reduce the price. But the government could have maintained the price. But there are structural problems that Cocobod itself has found itself in over the years that made it almost impossible. So it's the reason why this uninformed propaganda being spun around by these guys sometimes gets me very angry.
1 2 anamo yenti. What yesika so na fe de odebesheka. Ebusuafo ade ba ko penti na yate ye koko so. The ati cocoa no so nyina ene ne se abai we anton ye cocoa no embra na nkese so ye dan oton no enti nani so te no na eka no so at ebo no so ate aye dan aba fam ama cocoa na ka eside mu enti me no ka sei me ne wo cocoa na ye ton ma abai na nkese abai de kwajiska man no abo no so e na aka eside mu e no ntumi ye dan enton na instead of so obeji atum na onu ehu se onu na wehu na djuma ye enti anko peska metua ye ka no o se wo mo na ese ye den wo te wo ka so.
And I agree with you when you said why investigation has not been done, because you see when the government took over, the Cocobod should have instituted a criminal inquiry into all the happenings that have happened at Cocobod and get the Ghanaian people informed and put the AG on notice to go on with whatever sort of prosecution that ought to be done at the time. Failure to do so, you energize and give these people energy. And it's the reason why today they are everywhere, as if they've done nothing. But Cocobod could not maintain that particular price because there were structural problems that has to do with...
Can you elaborate on the structural problems so that we know exactly...
Yes. Because if you go to Cocobod, over the years, the financing model has always been cocoa syndicated loan. The first time we went, I think it was 2015, 2016, we went for $1.7 billion. We were able to pay the following year $1.8 billion until 2023, 2024, when we went back to the cocoa syndicated market for a loan. And they told us, the books of Cocobod are so dirty to the standard, you cannot assess this syndication. So we cannot give you that money. So instead of going for the 1.3 or 1.8 billion, they decided to give us $690 million, which wasn't enough to buy cocoa. Because at the time, Cocobod books had become so dirty to the standard, nobody was willing to give you that particular money. And again, financing those loans were also very expensive and the banks were not ready to guarantee. For instance, if you go for $1.8 billion, you end up financing it around $150 million. That was enough for people to give you that particular guarantee. Already, the institution is sinking. Just like any other state-owned enterprises, I told you, they've all morphed into debt-producing machines, not making money because of certain reckless decisions by management and other related decisions that they take. So Cocobod at that point wasn't sustained. So we were handed a paltry amount of 690, which wasn't enough. So government has to find a way. That is where this buyer financing model started. Initially, we started on 60-40. 60-40 means the buyer will give you 60% of the money, and then Cocobod will finance the other 40% for the first year. Unfortunately, that year, the cocoa that we were supposed to produce, we could not supply. We've gone for the money, but we were supposed to supply a particular amount of cocoa to buyers because we've taken their money. But we could not supply. we were owning a deficit of about 333,728 metric tons of cocoa, a backlog to be paid. And this particular cocoa we are owning, the price had already been determined, locked at $2,600. So it means that the previous year, you were supposed to provide cocoa to somebody. The price has already been determined. You couldn't produce all. The following year, you have to produce. The following year, the cocoa price wasn't going to stand at the same stage. I don't know if you're following the argument.
Yeah.
So the following year, the government was supposed to pay the cocoa farmer $3,100 per ton. But you've already locked the cocoa you are owning, which is about 333,000 at 2,660 per ton. It means that every single cocoa you supply in the following year, you'll be losing $446. So just imagine we are owning 333,000 in excess, multiplied by 436. You'll be running into over $941 million because of that alone. So with this, Cocobod cannot say, yes, there is a challenge today. Yes, I am guaranteeing for the cocoa farmer. I am paying, because you cannot pay because you are owning. Last year we supplied, I think, 253,000, which that alone cost the Cocobod over millions of dollars. And then this year the remaining 98,000 has to be supplied. But the funny aspect is that if cocoa is selling on the world market $6,000 today, and you are supplying the backlog, you cannot sell at this current price, because the price had already been determined.
The price that was determined for the backlog
has been locked already. So government cannot come and tell cocoa farmer that we own somebody. We sold it to the person 2,600. So please let us buy it at 2,600. The cocoa farmer will not agree. So government was forced to buy at the current price, but go and sell to the farmer. You are not even going to sell, to go and deliver on that particular price, meaning you'll be running at a loss. And again, the same Cocobod went to African Development Bank and took a loan of about $350 million. They said they were going to do cocoa rehabilitation of about 156,000 hectares. Do you know what they did? They ended up rehabilitating just 54,000, and the entire $350 million went away, and they spent extra 700 million Ghana cedis.
When you say went away,
it was wasted. It was wasted
by
the previous administration how do you, senseless fixtures. Let me use that expression, senseless fixtures. People, Cocobod has always been a financing machine where people used to finance their political urges, those kind of stuff. If any nonsense, that is, the Cocobod comes handy. We use it to do. I will delve deeper into some of the dealings that went on. And then Cocoa Road also became another fertile avenue that they also used to do some of these things, because the allocation made was around 4 billion Ghana cedis, and somebody will award road contract to a tune of about 26 billion Ghana cedis. So the financing gap alone is 21.6 billion. The allocation made was just 4.4 billion. And somebody will go ahead and award contract knowing very well that there is no money. You understand? So these are some of the reckless administrative decisions that have been taken over the years that has brought Cocobod into the sad state that they find itself in. And
quick question. Knowing all this,
yes,
and this should have been known,
yes,
then why make any promise based on certain prices when there's the awareness that this rot is existing and these prices cannot be realistic? Whether the prices seem realistic at the time of the promise, and why?
Yes, it did, because you see, when you are not in the institution, you might be privy to happenings, but maybe not details to that extent until you are handed the keys to go and do forensic audit to understand the state of play. You understand?
We all knew the economy was in crisis, but some of the things I'm discovering myself, it's been a criminal handling of our economy. And Ghana is a crime scene, actually.
All of us were talking about corruption before the change. We knew there were actual corruption, but to the extent and the scale, you could only presume that this thing has been done. But when you actually walk through the gate, you are handed over the keys to delve deeper into the actual happening. That is why you are able to understand the details of some of these things. Procurement was one of the key things. And when it comes to this jute sack procurement, it became like a Christmas bonus that was being issued out. You know, it was very senseless and very reckless. It started. If you go to the year 2022, 2023, Cocobod already had a bulk that could satisfy its needs at the time. But they awarded a contract of about 75,000 bales of jute sack. When we say bales, every bill, I think standard one is 400, each is 400. So they ordered 75,000 bales of jute sack, and 74,000 was produced. That was okay. Then the following year, they contracted another 75,000. Out of the 75,000, they only received 17,000. So you ask yourself, where is the remaining 57,000? And then the following year, they went ahead and awarded 56,000, then received just 546. Monies are being paid, though. Whether they are paid or not.
I'm getting the sense that there's all this filth, stench, corruption here.
Yes.
I'm getting that sense, and I think it should be very clear to all Ghanaians that there was a pile of rot at the Cocobod.
Yes.
Right. But I just want to move on.
Yes.
Being aware of all this rot, this stench, this debt, you know, on what basis will any government make a promise? Is it that they made a promise because they were not aware too deeply of the rot and the stench that was existing? So promise based on what they were hopefully budgeting, or they knew that this is the rot that is there, but let's make the promise. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand you. You see, I think what happened was that if you are making a promise from the outside, because you buy cocoa, you go and sell based on the current world market price, you will have to look at what you're buying as against the price at the world market, because that is what the farmer is entitled to. So if I'm making a promise, I will just look at the figures, what you're buying and what the price is, and argue that the farmer deserves to be paid properly, or the farmer deserves a better price. So if it is about $1,000, I will expect that at least the farmer will get 7,000. We go out there to sell our cocoa today. If you look at the current price, because you cannot pinch it at a particular price, because on daily basis it keeps reducing. The last time it was 4,000, the last time it was 3,000. Today, government is paying in excess of about 90% of the FOB price to the farmer.
In order to cushion the farmer, the PPLC has recommended that the farmer be paid 90% of the achieved gross FOB of $4,200 per ton, to mitigate the adverse impact on the farmer as a result of the fall in the world market price.
That is enough commitment. I don't know, if we take cocoa and we go to the world market to sell, whatever that we get per ton, the farmer is entitled to 90% of everything, which has never happened before. But because of the crisis, even though the price have been reduced, maybe government doesn't want the crisis of the farmer to be so overwhelming to the extent that it will crash their mojo and the sort of energy that people have invested into the cocoa sector. But I think the challenge that has happened today, you cannot blame the farmer. You cannot blame the farmer, because the expectation is that I go to the bush to do my cocoa, I sell to government, because the government has the monopoly. The cocoa farmer cannot load the cocoa in a car and travel anywhere to go and sell. The Cocobod has the monopoly, so I expect that you pay me well. And because when it goes up, you are able to get a profit. When it comes down, you should be able to provide some sort of a safeguard to be able to cushion the farmer. But the reality is that at the world market, there is a crisis. And Ghana is not the only country facing this. If you go to Cote d'Ivoire today, they are facing similar challenges, even though they are contemplating on reducing the prices, but they haven't. And now they are telling people to store their cocoa for a better days ahead. And that has generated a whole lot of crisis. So this thing is not something that is just limited to Ghana. And we have to blame ourselves as people, because have you asked yourself, why is it that over the years, since Nkrumah time up to now, why must we every year produce cocoa and put everything on a ship and sell to somebody raw without adding value to it? You understand? If it had happened that we are able to add value to cocoa, maybe we wouldn't care much about what is happening at the war stage. And have you asked yourself that Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire produce about 70 to 60% of the entire cocoa production worldwide? Why are we not the people who determine the prices? Because we can add value to it. You understand? So I think we are all guilty in this particular way. So it's an interplay of several factors that has occasioned in the heart.
Yeah, I understand. I just bring it back to the politics that has gone into this right now.
Yes.
Because I've heard everything you're saying.
Yes.
What is the politics? How can the opposition rally farmers and say, go out and protest? What are they protesting on? What has happened?
I think that is understandable for opposition. You always look at it, feed on the negative side, because don't forget that this is opposition, that there's a party that was booted out of power. And after exiting power, they've been caged for almost 1 year. So it's like a dog in a cage. You know, there hasn't been any active scandal in the last 1 year. So they've been held at bay. Now the Cocobod issue has come. They need to visit on it and make, you know, a molly mountain out of it. So this whole thing is like a storm in a teacup. Because they are privy to the circumstances, they know what has actually happened, but yet you need to incite farmers, because their justification is that the president made a promise to cocoa farmers and now he has deceived them. That is why I started by quoting the earlier 2nd August prices.
And so let me be clear today. We will ensure our commitment to pay our farmers 70% of the world market price of cocoa.
Whether the government has cheated the farmer or not, that can be referenced from that particular point, because the promise was 70% of the FOB price, and it was paid, and even extra was paid until this crisis started caving in. And at that point, government could not have done anything, because if we had maintained the earlier price, Cote d'Ivoire is having the same crisis. Obviously, the smuggling will be coming in, and unfortunately, we don't have a proper financing model for this thing. Now we are doing what we call buyer-based financing model, which is 80-20. So the buyer will give you money, go to the market, buy me cocoa, and I want 500,000 metric tons of cocoa. For the buyer, if you exceed the limit, they are no more interested. Whatever remains, it is up to you to find money to finance the gap. You understand? So that has also brought a challenge. So Cocobod cannot go beyond that particular projection that they've had with the buyers, because the person is telling you, and again, the person buying the cocoa from you has given you money. So now we are just acting as Goro boys. They will give you money, go and buy cocoa and bring it. You understand? You don't make any determination. You might have made political promise to your people, you do this, you do that, but somebody is giving you money to go and buy. That is why the decision subsequent to that has to be, you know, addressed very properly, especially the decision by the president that going forward, we are coming up with a sustained, guaranteed source of financing Cocobod. That is the cocoa bill. And for me, it's one of the best things that will happen to cocoa farmers in this country, because there is this assured. We are not going out there to borrow. Now, money will be taken from the local market. Ghanaians, bonds will be issued where local banks and Ghanaians will go and buy, and at the end of the day, it is in local currency, so we will not be racing against any dollar CD fluctuations. It's stable, and government will be able to generate those money to cater for some of these things, so that this long-standing culture of having to go out to borrow, syndication, do this, go and beg people for money, acting as intermediaries, Goro boys, all these hurdles will be pushed aside, and then government will be able to generate money from here to buy cocoa. And at the end of the day, what the cocoa farmer deserves, the person will get it. And then there is going to be a legislation, and for me, that is the best among all these things. I mentioned that in 2023-2024, the cocoa price at the world market went as far as $10,000 to $12,000. The cocoa farmer, if the cocoa farmer was to be paid even 70%, they would have been entitled to $7,000 at the time. So government is saying that in order not to cheat cocoa farmers ever again, we are coming up with a legislation that legislation is going to bind every government post this Mahama administration that you cannot pay the cocoa farmer less than 70% of the FOB price. So if you're a cocoa farmer, I missed this storm, I think there is a light at the end of the tunnel that your interest has been guaranteed, has been locked up if this particular provision. So the pressure should rather be extended to government, force the government to make sure that these two promises are kept, making sure they push the government to come out with a legislation and ensure that 70% of the FOB price, not less than all the time the farmer will be entitled to. And then the other aspect of it will also be...
What are the timelines for this? I know things have been planned.
Yes.
Like you're saying.
Yes.
What are the timelines? Because the farmers are out there now being incited.
Yes.
So what do you go to the farmers now to tell them, oh, don't worry, we have these plans that will take how long? How long should they wait?
Yeah, I think government will have to activate communication on this particular cocoa, because I think the information is not going down. So those misinforming have rather taken the lead. They are in the villages inciting farmers and...
1, 2, and more yenti. What is SHকথING na fedi ode be sheka? Ebusuafo ade ba ko penti na na yate ye koko so. De enti yate koko ni so nyina ene ne se abai we anton ye koko no embra na nkese so ye dan. Oton no. Onimu. Enti na ni so te no no na eka no so at ebo no so ate ayedan aba fam. Ama koko na ka eside mu. Enti me no ka sei me ne wo koko na ye ton ma abai na nkese abai de kogis man no abo no so. And I can see them, and to me a day, and ton. Now, instead of so, Beji atum. Now, on when we say, on the one who the Jumaye, and see Uncle Pesca met you a cano, or say, woman, and say a day, what's so castle. Medomanuesi. Now, the American say, a cadaho, and so a byway, a cotton land cruises, and Macumako 10. A cadaho, and so a byway, a cotton pickups, and Macumako 110. I'm on the Jumaye 4. A cadaho. Muntio, a cadaho, and so Cocobod CEO, a fa Cocobod sika, acquire renovation when if ye. Now, I don't a cadaho. Now, to me, Tim Coco, Queen Missikaso. Now, they are kept you on to me a day. And so.
By now, I was expecting that Cocobod should have been there already, explaining these things in a language that people will understand. You know, because the very people who created this...
The people who are supposed to go and explain these things, do they understand?
You should understand. You should understand.
That's the question.
Yeah.
They should, but do they?
But if you are managing a sector, I don't work at Cocobod. Okay. You understand that? So people there should be privy to detailed information that can even better explain the thing, just like I am explaining from outside, you understand? So, but there are people in who should have better understanding and appreciation. And it's not just about understanding, how to communicate in the language that people will understand. And then the urgency of it. Because if you allow the opposition, who has caused all this mess, to take the lead, go there and incite farmers and activate a certain propaganda campaign in a bid for political expediency, by the time you go there, nobody will take you serious because they might have been lied to already. So you have to go and distill the lie first before you sell the actual information to them. And that is going to be a mountain of a Herculean task, especially when politics has taken the center stage of everything that we do. So my point is that if there has been any act of malice on the part of government to undermine cocoa farmers, I will be the first person to raise the alarm. But the fact is that the initial commitment was kept. The initial promise that was made to the cocoa farmer was made. Unfortunately, there has been a downturn and the pricing at the war stage, which government has no control, because over the years, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, we haven't been acting the way we're supposed to act as producers. We should have been the people determine the pricing, and we have failed adding value to cocoa. So we have to pack everything in a ship, take it out there. If you go and the person says, I don't need it anymore, cocoa, you can't use it for anything unless we come back and chew it. You understand? So it means we have failed ourselves. The reason why the fluctuations at the war stage keep coming back at us. You understand? If you are not lucky and they drop down further, government will have to cough up extra money, because at this point, it will be a political disaster for government to go further and reduce the price.
I think maybe it's my old age.
Okay.
Because what I'm trying to understand really is this.
Okay.
Like you said, cocoa prices have always been fluctuating from time immemorial.
Yes.
We know that.
Yes.
You know it, I know it.
Yes.
You know, And even on one program, I said that the Nkrumah's 7-year development plan that he launched was practically killed, because that year when he launched the development plan, the cocoa prices dropped to the lowest ever.
Lowest.
You know, so this is just to say something that we have been experiencing.
Yes.
So we should know that the pricing is not in our hands.
Yes.
So my question to you is, should that have been at the back of Mahama's promise that these prices can be volatile? Can I make these promises based on what we know can happen?
Yes. I think the fluctuations has always been there, but the fluctuation has been happening within a certain limited range. Very often, the expectation is that on a yearly basis it goes up, because in as much as there are word prices, we also negotiate. So you negotiate within a certain parameter that will actually benefit your farmer, because their interest is very paramount and must be considered. So in making that particular promise, Mahama was making a specific reference to the pricing at the time, which was $10,000. That was quite unprecedented. And at the time, the dollar was as high as 16 cedis. So if I'm making a promise, I'll tell you that at this time, the farmer deserved more. And truly, the farmer at the time deserved more, because the price had actually gone around $10,000 to $13,000. And if we were to pay 70% of the FOB price at the time, as against 15 point, even $16, the farmer would have been entitled to 7,000. So it wasn't like a conjecture. That was the factual reality at the time that he was presenting. And now the situation we find ourselves in, you see, it's not as if the promise made have not been kept. People should understand that the promises are made in dollar equivalents, or the rate at the international stage, the pricing. You cannot give what you don't have. So the price, that is the price at the war stage, based on it, this local determination is made as to how much you are going to pay the farmer. That is why when Mahama took over in the August 2025, the price at the war stage, the gross FOB price was around $7,000. And then he paid $5,040, representing 70%. That is the point I want people to understand, meaning that the promise that he made was kept.
Regarding the 70%?
Regardless, because the 70% was made. But the only challenge was that the government has also brought in other interventions which have made the dollar stabilize and the CD a bit, a value added. So in as much as the cocoa farmer will not get a cash 70 million right in the pocket, it has been invested in other areas of the economy. It's the reason why you see this economic stability. So if the money is few, you can buy a lot of things because there is value. But for the average cocoa farmer, people are not interested. In Ghanaians, we are always interested in the bulk money. But the bulk money did not come because of this particular situation we have. So that is what makes this whole thing, the propaganda aspect of this, very nasty. And people who are spending this, they know, they understand. You understand? They know what is happening. But for propaganda's sake, they are just activating this line. But the people who are supposed to inform people is our media people. They understand these things. They understand the factual realities. You understand? Because in our part of the world, whenever a conversation is riddled with mathematical flourishness, where people make percentages, this plus this, this plus this, naturally we shy away because nobody wants to embarrass himself. And this figures being thrown around has to do with percentages, statistics. So people actually don't want to go into, so they always want to wait and hear what others will say. But when you walk in, you realize that, has Mahama deceived the people? That is the first question you ask yourself. The answer is no, because he made 70% promise of the FOB price. It was 7,000 he paid. Now the price has depreciated as low as 3,100 thereabout of the FOB price, and he is paying 90% of the FOB price. So where is the deceit? The people are not getting it because the price at the war stage has reduced, and he cannot just go and carry other money and pay. He's paying you based on the market price at the war stage. Now it has reduced to, so he could have decided to pay the 70%, which obviously will be around 1,500, but he had decided to say, no, I cannot continue to pay the 70% promise that I made. I am extending it to 90%. So now we go and sell the cocoa, everything has been given to the farmer. It got to a point they were even giving the farmer 99%. You understand? We go and sell and we give everything to the farmer because their interest is quite key and paramount. So if you can criticize government based on over the years how inefficient Cocobod has become, and for that particular fact, the failure to put these issues and opinion issues on notice and having get an attorney general involved to prosecute these individuals. For that, you can take government on, because that was the expectation. When the cabinet came out with that particular directive, myself, I was disappointed because the last time when I came here, I told you on point blank that this investigation ought to have started long ago. ECG, Cocobod, scholarship secretariat, every single state-owned enterprise and state entities became a crime scene in this particular country. The crimes are quite obvious. So what at all are we doing? Because people voted massively for John Mahama, not because of anything, because based on the understanding that a certain criminal cartel took over this country, they messed this country up, and for that matter, there is the need for us to go after these people and get our money back. You understand? For the average Ghanaian, nothing will convince them aside conviction, prosecution of these people. So that should have gone on at Cocobod. When Randiabe took over, he saw the books. Understood all these things. So what prevented this kind of forensic audit? Should have been done long ago. Because one, there is a crisis. If you go out there to tell people that NPP did that, NPP, nobody will take you serious. Because that should have been communicated earlier. You know, that is why I think they are having very hard time explaining it. And the opposition is rather spinning the propaganda that is running fast, because failure to put these items on notice and having
what precisely is the opposition communicating to the farmers that have got them so upset?
Oh, it's just propaganda. I'm saying that you see some of these issues.
But what are they what is in the propaganda that the government has cheated them?
They are telling them that John Mahama made a promise he was going to pay them 70 million. Rather, he has reduced it. That the government doesn't think about farmers, but it is them, the opposition, who actually took care of farmers, and they are still fighting for them.
Koko ekuya for mat da say abaya ka che say Cocobod ndeka da. Embre bia ye do maka say Cocobod deka. And so what is aban bia ba e de Cocobod ka ode aye excuse ati usika so da. Ye ba be mu 2017 na NDC for car omaboato wo amana na dan ko ekufa don ye binie. Loan, syndicated loan $1.8 billion omkoje ye. So omo de be didwa ama Ghana no. Omo lose election December 7th. You do 30th December, no more discanning in a man fan to cocoa. Moti say Ekufado to Mukoko so because of Saikano. Ekufado one fat Cocobod CEO. Or ye Juma and the NDC and Cocot. Opunimante. NDC are by way by Omono Mayday, Omejano. Now a cana ye beto from 2017. No. A Sakana Aba Premane. Sa 2017 cano. And one Abba Day, Abba Pumne. Now Woboka at 2016. Now oba ebeto kana. Now the sakani yeden eswaye.
Which is a lie, because the FOB price 70% that John Mahama was paying when he took over. The 70% that he paid when he took over. If the NPP had kept that particular money, the cocoa farmer would have been better now, because at the time when it went to 13 to 10,000, they would have received somewhere around 7,000 to 8,000 per bag. But they didn't. But these people turn around after also messing up with Cocobod. It got to a point that they have to run to Bank of Ghana for a 10-year bond. That is still sitting in the books of Cocobod. We went to African Development Bank, took a loan of 350 million, I've mentioned, to rehabilitate cocoa sector. At the end of the day, less than 10% of that money was used. You understand? And several other ill, dirty stuff happened under Cocobod. The Cocobod as an entity was overstaffed. They pushed in a lot more people. If you go the number of people working there and drawing salary and you ask yourself, what are they doing? There is absolutely nothing there they are doing. So that Nōnsense said, we need a drastic, radical measures just to ensure that we inject sense of efficiency into state-owned enterprises. So punishing these people will also serve as a caution or deterrent to people within the current administration. And if you mess up, there is the day of reckoning is coming. You understand? You see, we need to make corruption a high-risk venture. And we must even begin to punish people for taking reckless, senseless decisions. If we fail to do these things, people in the name of administration will begin implementing stupid, silly ideas that come to their mind.
Quick question. Now that we fail to do these things, now that we didn't subject them to intensive scrutiny.
Yeah.
And if you will, prosecuting those who need to be prosecuted,
Yeah.
that was not done.
Yes.
How difficult is it now to come back and tell the people who are actually inciting the farmers
Yes.
that you are not just the cause of the problem, you are a major part of the problem?
Yes.
And how believable can that be? Because you have had 1 year,
Yes.
things look normal.
Yes.
Take it from there.
Yeah. I think this particular no narrative can flip the coin now, because they've already taken the lead. So the best language to flip this narrative is prosecution. That is the only way. Because these people have gone down, propagated lie to farmers to the extent that they went to the areas and asked people to Accra to come and do demonstration. They were actually paying them money to come and demonstrate. These people were not cocoa farmers. They were not, and hire people from Sukura, somewhere, Dodowa and Co. Gave them money, dressed them in red, gave them 200, 300. After the demonstration, some of them were even asking for their money because they didn't pay them, because the people were not cocoa farmers.
Demonstration, demonstration. Demonstration,
You see, that is what we have reduced our politics to become.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the so-called mainstream media, who are privy to all the critical facts that I have outlaid, they understand the pricing model and the fact that the difficulties that the Cocobod has gone through over the years. And they need to speak the fact. After stating the fact, if you want to criticize government, that is a fair thing, because on the issue of having to reduce the price or not, that can be debatable, because yes, the price at the war stage has been reduced. A political promise has been made for the cocoa farmer. They cannot be subjected to whatever that happens. Deal with it. Government will have to find money to shove up the difference and continue to pay the farmer. That is a debate that we can have, you understand. But to do a propaganda and say that, oh, the government has cheated, the amount of money they promised to pay, that is not what they are paying. When the government indeed is paying extra beyond the 70% and is now paying 90%, that is pure propaganda, you understand. And they understand that the books of Cocobod are so dirty to the extent that no bank out there will be willing and ready to finance Cocobod in terms of buying. Have you asked yourself why we lost access to the syndicated market? The previous CEO came and did an announcement, oh, henceforth we've weaned ourselves from the cocoa syndication. We are no longer going for syndication. But that was a lie, because when they started, the first time we went there, we had $1.7 billion. 2016-2017 was the highest year. We had 1.8 billion. Then subsequently, it started dwindling up to 1.3. Then the next time when we went there, they told us in the face, no, your books are so dirty. Cocobod, nobody can guarantee Cocobod. So we are giving you 690. That is where we had to switch on to the buyer model, the 60-40 model at the early stage. And now, when government took over, you had no other option, because the books are still dirty. Where are you going to get money? You have to go with the buyer model.
The books are very dirty.
Yes.
And I think what hurts me sitting here today is the fact that the very people who are actually inciting farmers to rise up are people who are very, very, very much aware of the things that has caused them to be in this situation.
Yes,
it is very, very, very unfortunate.
Very unfortunate.
And I think the whole idea, and I don't know where it's coming from, this whole year of, and you were very, very right.
Yes.
Investigating state agencies, forensic audits that we have left to just for a whole year. It's coming back now. To bite the country.
Yes. Because you see, I keep telling people that the arena we find ourselves is a different arena. The political audience of yesterday is different from the political audience of today. Today, the average young Ghanaian who is a consumer of the political market today is very savvy. They are very assertive. They understand the issues. You can't keep them in the loop. So the promise is that we are going to prosecute. They want to see you prosecute. They don't want any excuses, you understand? So even, yes, I understand prosecution may take a long time, but the forensic audit that will occasion and trigger the prosecution should have been done.
Yeah.
The report presented, you understand, because Cocobod should have done this thing long ago. So I don't know what they were doing there, you understand. ECG is another thing. ECG should be investigated. All other agencies must be investigated because we all agreed it was a crime scene, you understand. So what are the facts? Else, beyond the fact, it remains conjectures, suppositions, and assumptions. The only way to put value behind this thing is when proper investigation have been done. And in the absence of that, today, these jokers are out there lying, infuriating farmers and telling them that the government that is rather paying 70% and haven't even extended to 90% is being accused of not loving farmers, but rather they who instituted all the mess that we find ourselves in today. So I think that it's a lesson that government need to, you know.
You know the only advice I give government now.
Okay.
And I it's a biblical quotation. And I'm doing my version of the quotation. No Corinthians chapter, whatever. No,
okay.
This is my version. Have you heard the statement that for what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul?
Yes.
Yeah. My quotation is that for what shall it profit Ghanaians when we have good indicators of the economy, fuel prices going down, and everything, if we shall gain all of that and lose our fight on corruption?
Yes, and the criminals who foolishly stole from us.
Yes.
Walk free.
Walk free. Not only are they walking free, they are walking free with parading.
Yeah, with impunity.
With impunity.
Yes, overriding impunity.
Thank you. So until that is done, hey.
Yes, and you see, they feel energized. They feel emboldened.
Yeah.
You can go and lie.
Yeah.
And the media space lacks sanity. You can just use any platform to do propaganda. The people who sit there, whether it is by malice or whatever, who understand the issue will not open up and subject them to critical scrutiny. So today you can wake up, go to any media platform, say anything and walk away. All the media, the journalists will be asking is, they will even be finding you to do more. You understand? When they know the critical fact, misinforming majority of the people, especially when the area has to do with this sort of mathematical percentage kind of stuff, people don't actually want to work in. So I think that we need government. The only language Ghanaians will understand now is to be very radical. I've told you, I don't believe in let's give to God kind of nonsense. You know, God is not interested in our politics. We are managing our own affairs. Every criminal must suffer the brunt, the anger of the state. That is why I've always been advocating. Anytime I come here, I tell you that we need to establish the conventional red lines. Last week, the former president of South Korea has been jailed live, has been handed a life sentence for inciting the military to block access to parliament and other places. Just that. They said he attempted to, introduce what you call the martial law. And for that matter, he's going to jail forever. Former president, immediate past former president. How much more these petty criminals who are not even intelligent? You understand? I think that the state must be very radical. The Attorney General will have to muzzle up and make sure that, hey, I understand that this logistical constraint and other stuff, but I have always suggested that this office of the Special Prosecutor are a useless creation. They are just further burden the taxpayer. We need to expand the tentacles of the Attorney General and make sure that they have a representation in every region, resource them. Prosecution cannot only be initiated in Accra. Let us make the regional offices very active. Give them power. Give them the documents. Let them do the investigation and activate prosecution. So across board, it will be on daily basis. People will see that these criminals are really answering, and that will also send a loud message to people within government. Those cutting deals, those forming companies within a short period So it will send a loud message to them that Charlie, the governance, as we speak of today, it's a different ball game altogether because the audience have changed. We have to also change the politicking, else we will become irrelevant. Because today, if you meet the average person out there, the level of political understanding they have, it will shock you. So if you think you are dealing with gullible masses who don't know their left from their right, you are rather living in the past. You understand? People have come to appreciate the understanding issue because always there is a flow of information.
Yeah. We have to end it here and pick it this up later, but when it talks about gullibility, I hope as you are believing that people are becoming less and less gullible. I hope that is true, because I think gullibility is amazingly high still.
Yes.
Maybe there's been some improvement, but it's still very, very amazingly high. But folks, we had to do a little bit of unfiltered. I had to get this whole cocoa thing steadied a bit, because it beats my mind. It beats my mind, but I won't go into that. It beats my mind that we get here after everything we've been through, and I'm so surprised and disappointed that there's no strong, if you will, an NDC communication team in place that can actually counter so much propaganda that they are facing. And if propaganda is not countered, it just assumed to be the truth.
You see, the funny aspect is that when the NPP lost power, 2024, what they did is that when the government was about exiting at the early stages of 2025, few days to exit power, Cocobod awarded contract to somebody to supply juice sack. When we had bulk, they gave them a contract to produce 80,000 bales. The person produced none. None. Zero. 80,000 bales. None. So procurement was another avenue for or misappropriation or whatever. So these are verifiable crimes that have been committed. And I think the average Ghanaian seeks answers. We need to appreciate that the political audience in 1990, the political audience in 2000 are different from the current audience.
Yeah.
They are very versatile, very assertive, and always want to be part of their conversation.
I mean, I'll get you back, because this conversation will continue.
I'm not PENDREAM TV. Now, so far so good. Say open online portal e Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.